All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Terry White, your host today, and with me is the one and only Aundre Larrow. Aundre, how are you?
What's up, Terry? How you doing,
How you
man?
doing? Good.
I am feeling pretty good. It's actually a pretty nice day. I've been inside
Good.
for what feels like 600 years, but
Haven't we all?
no, but it's good. It's good to see you. Well, sort of see you in a way.
Well, yeah, we're
Uh,
practicing social distancing from about, I don't know, 800 miles away. Yes, guys, it's going to be that one of those kind of streams today. So let's do some official housekeeping. Like I said, my name is Terry White, worldwide design and photography evangelist for Adobe. I'm joined with Aundre is a previous or alumni, we'll call him, creative resident at Adobe, photographer, and now lifetime friend of myself and
he's
Adobe.
with him. He lets me go to his house. Like it's real
Yeah,
now.
he's been to the house now. It's been for real. So we're going, or actually, I should say we, but it's really Aundre. Aundre is going to be doing some photo editing, showing you some Lightroom tips and techniques, um, working on photos in Lightroom, working on photos. I think that people submitted to him, which I'll be doing a topic like that next week as well, where you'll get to submit your photos and I'll edit them or show you what I would do to them. And today we also have a bunch of things going on Adobe Live. So before I forget that, let me go ahead and walk you through the schedule. For those of you who are maybe you joined the first couple streams and you're just joining us and you want to kind of see what's left for the day, let's go ahead and switch over to that. So we started off this morning with the Marshmallow Fan Video Challenge with Jason Levine. I have no idea. I want to go back and look at that now. I have no idea what
Yeah,
that was.
very. That means
The
it's March.
Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, which we will be looking at results from that for what people have submitted so far today. Jesus did that one. So now we're live at 9:30 a.m. with photo retouching with Aundre. And then right after us at 11:30 will be the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge. And then after that will be editorial design. And then after that will be the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. And then you're going to draw along with Kyle Webster. And then there's a design off with Voodoo Val and Brandon. So looking forward to that for the rest of the day. So we have an action-packed day. And Aundre, why don't you tell them more about you? They see me all the time and they see you sometimes. So for those that are new who haven't met you yet, why don't you tell them about you?
For sure. So my name's Aundre Larrow. Oh, that's my phone falling. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. All Florida jokes are appreciated, so feel free to throw them into the chat. I got a film camera from my theater teacher when I was in high school because he saw me playing with a disposable one. And since I made a bunch of yearbooks and kind of messed around a lot, I kind of kept taking photos. And now, years later, people are paying me to talk about it. This is really cool for me to be on Terry's stream. I've done it a couple times now, but it's important because Terry's been doing it for a long time. There are things that I definitely want to learn, and I'm excited about showing y'all. And learning is a super important part of my background. My mother's a teacher, so she's always told me that if you don't know something until you can show it to somebody else. So I look forward to talking about that with you guys for the next 2 days. I live in Brooklyn, New York now. And yes, COVID is serious, but it is still a good time for us to connect with each other. And that's why these streams are important. So if you really enjoy the stream, please tell Adobe because I'm trying to come back. And you can find me on the internet in ways that Terry will be dropping into the chat. But on Twitter, it's my first last name, Aundre Larrow. And on Instagram, it's my first name, Aundre. There is a U in it. And if you want to see more of my work, you can see it there. We're also going to talk about some of it today. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right, pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about what you plan on doing today and tomorrow, because you're up for both days.
I am up for both days, and hopefully every day forever. I'm just kidding. I posted on my Instagram and Twitter the questions feature and asked people what they wanted to talk about. And a lot of people talked to me about color. And so that's curves, so parametric, point curve, RGB, as well as color mix. and presets and profiles. So I think often we all like want to take photos just like our favorite photographers. We want to say, hey, this person, Terry took this photo, Sam Harain took this photo, Sasha Rutanova took this photo, and I want to edit just like them. And so presets are kind of a cool way to do that. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about like how to look at color and how you kind of want to set some things up. We're going to go reasonably slow, not because I think y'all are dumb, but just because it's more helpful for us to make sure that everyone's on the same page. But our goal today is to do a brief introduction to Lightroom, just so everyone knows where we're going into it, and then talking pretty slowly about color and looking at a lot of examples. And today we'll be looking at some photos that Tristan King sent me. But if you have photos you want to submit, please write it into the chat, and then I will ping you about it after.
Sounds good. All right, so I see a bunch of people already in the chat. As a matter of fact, we had like over 400 in the waiting room before we started. So welcome, everyone. And with that said, just a couple quick shout outs for people I see. Francisco, our studio guys in the chat. Francisco he runs the Adobe Live Studio in San Francisco, so great to see him here. Andreas, Jenna, JR Flores, Tim Mobeast, John, welcome. Crystal, Victoria, let's see, who else do we see? Adrian, Tunk, if I'm saying that correctly, Santiago, Steve, lots of people here. Great to have you all here. Now, with that said, I off in the distance, way over there on my other display, I see some folks coming in on YouTube, and it's great if you're hanging out watching this on YouTube, watching this on Twitter. You happen to see it in passing. That's awesome. But if you really want to take advantage of the chat, you should hang out on behance.net/live, or Adobe Live, actually. So here, I think I've got it queued up here so you guys can see it. So here's the URL. So behance.net/live or behance.net/Adobe Live will take you right into this particular stream so you can participate in the chat. And, you get your shout outs that way and so forth and so on. So that's where we're going to be watching. That's where everything's going to that's the only chat I'm really going to be focused on today. And I'll feed questions over to Aundre so that Aundre can focus on the work that he's going to be doing.
Yep.
All right. So with that said, Aundre, are you ready to go to your desktop? Are you ready to get some stuff done?
Yeah. My desktop is open. Right.
Let's go ahead and switch over to it.
Before we really get into anything nitty gritty, I actually wanted to ask y'all when the last time you went to the Lightroom homepage was. Normally when you open on all your photos. So you're used to seeing this fun little, oh, wow. I guess we're just going to go kind of slow. Yeah. So you're used to seeing all this fun little amalgamation of selfies and everything that you're taking all over the place. But over here, there's a couple other buttons. So obviously we all know what add does. You can add your photos, review them for import. But home is actually really changed and revamped. And so what I wanted to show you was, obviously it has your recents, but in here we have these guided tutorials. And when I say we, I literally mean we. I want to shout out my friend Omar. Malik Sidibe is an incredible photographer. And as you can see, while you hover over these, it'll show you the originals. And when you pull away, you see the edits. And they're guided. So if we go over to Learn, there's two different ones. So Discover just shows you the edits before and after. But Learn is pretty cool because it'll walk you through what the photographer was thinking. So we're going to go through portraits because I know one of mine is in here. I just have to find it.
So yeah, I've got a few in there as well somewhere.
Oh, Terry also has some. Sorry, Terry, I should know that.
No, I haven't submitted any new ones in a while, so mine are probably buried down at the bottom.
So, for example, when you click in, here's one of mine. This is a photo of my friend Kayla. She's awesome. Helps take photos of cool people. But when you hit Start Tutorial, and you guys can do this on your own time. We'll drop the link in the chat. As you go through, it'll talk to you about what I was thinking, why I did certain things, and then how to get through each step. So you can walk through your steps, and you're also seeing all of the options for, we're going to talk about profiles today. So this is a good example, how you select your profiles, why you want to crop, how you crop. And this seems really rudimentary, but it's a really good way for you to get really accustomed to the tools. So we'll just kind of go through, and you see how it's just kind of smart moving along the way. The goal here is so that sometimes you don't want to sit here and look at this. You don't want to watch a stream, or maybe it's late and you just kind of want to learn how to do something specific. You can click through these and you'll see like, okay, this is how this point could work. This is how these things work. So just want to give a shout out to that. There's a ton of them in here. And if you like mine, you can actually go to my page.
Oh, there's one of mine. You just scroll past it.
Oh, hold on.
Go back. I just saw it there.
Josh Shafto.
Keep going. One more. There it is. The one with the sunglasses by the lake.
Oh.
You passed it. I was at the top of the screen. It was at the top of the screen. I don't know where it is now.
Oh, here we go. So here's another one. Here's Terry's. So this is from flat photo to fabulous social media post. So you can see that he is cropping. Down here it says core features, correct the color, fix the lighting. So you'll see the before and the after. And then, first of all, 300,000 people looked at it.
Just 300,000. I mean, dude, I can't get a million anything. I can't get a million followers on YouTube. I can't get a million people to look at my tutorials. What's going on?
Dude, I can't get 1,000 people to watch anything I'm doing. All right, so you go through here. He talks about lens correction. As you click through the steps, you can, let's say you already know this, you can skip this step. But as you go through here, it'll say really things that tell you how he's thinking about the image, how he's editing it, and it guides you through it. It shows you what he selected, why, and various other options, and it's responsive, so you can click on other things throughout. So it's like a choose your own adventure Goosebumps book for everyone that is exactly my age and knows what they are. And I know I shouldn't be, but I just saw my homie Marcy Valerio, shout out. Thank you for taking care of me when I was in Nashville. You have my love and respect. And so as you go through here, you're seeing Terry's bringing the highlights down, and he's given this like a really cool film look, right? Something that like film is in a movie. She feels like this is like a spy thing, spy thriller. I'm sure you shot this in Atlanta where everything is shot, and it looks cool. So he warms it up, and it talks to you here about.
Sure, that's where I shot it. Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
I'm kidding. I'm messing with you. Keep going.
Okay. So that's what it looks like. So each person has their own page. So you see Terry has the tutorials, which are guided, and then edits, which are the before and after. So you'll see that this photo now you can see the railing, you can see all this stuff. You can see how he brought in detail back on her face and kind of kept her color what it was. So once again, this is on the home page of the Lightroom app, and you don't need to buy Lightroom to be able to use this. You can do this on the Lightroom mobile app on your phone, on your iPad. This information is free. And one good thing about this crisis at this point, I know there are only a few, is that we have the time to learn some more things that we want to learn. So I have a couple more in here, and you guys can see as you scroll through the before and afters. And I always find these helpful because I get an idea of vision, like how the person likes to edit, maybe what I'm looking at and what the differences might be. I tried to add a mix in of different things, some portraits, some different people, different hair, just to try to hit what different people wanted. And Terry, you're talking about not hitting a million.
That's all. Yeah, that's also a good point, is that just the fact that you're able to see the before and after, even if you're not trying to learn specifically the steps, you're getting a chance to see what the photographer had in mind for just improving the image overall. You can see where it started, maybe out of the camera, a RAW file or JPEG or whatever it was, and then see the finished step or the finished process and say, oh, okay, I get it now. These are the kinds of things I should be looking for in terms of lighting, color, mood, looks, or whatever it is for my photo, or a photo if I really like the way it looks. And also a new feature, and maybe Aundre's about to touch on this, so hopefully I'm not stealing his thunder, is that for the before and after ones, you can download those as presets and apply them to your photos. So if you really like the way something looks there, download it as a preset, and it's in your Lightroom mobile, your Lightroom desktop, and you can apply it right to your photos on the spot.
These are some of my favorite people, Noemi and Lydia. Yeah. Also, I apologize, guys. I think we can all admit to this. Internet seems worse right now, possibly because we're all using it. So everything's taking a little bit longer, but we all here for you. So learn. is exactly what we looked at. Discover is more the before and afters. The learn are the ones where you can click through. For the curious folks, just really quick, this little screen right here shows all the things I have shared to web. But let's get into my library. And what we're going to do is we're going to just talk about what we're seeing here in Lightroom really fast. So up here, we have this little like triangle with the wing to it. We have basically how we can categorize and organize our library. So we can say, I want photos that were taken, that are raw, that are JPEGs, that are videos. One cool thing about Lightroom, or that our current version of Lightroom, Lightroom on the cloud, is that you don't have to tag anymore. I'm not a big tagger, so I can type in something like yellow, and it'll search and find all my things that fall into this category. It's not perfect, but it is a helpful way to find things, especially if you take a lot of images. Another thing that I want to touch on is, let's say you're not searching, you're not sure. You took something on your phone, you don't know where it was or when it was. You can search by location, and then if your other camera has GPS, you can do that. Also, as you can see, I take photos of a lot of different things, so I might know, oh, I did a job that I photographed on like a 10S Max, which I know I don't own, so that had to have been like an Apple-related thing or whatever. And so if I'm looking for something, I can find it based on the camera. And then once again, since it's cloud-based, it allows you to figure out what is syncing, what is already synced, what is stored locally, meaning on your drive, and then what's synced with from Lightroom Classic. Something else I want to bring up that is less of a big deal on desktop, but really makes sense on mobile, is over here when you right-click on an album, you can do something called Store Album Locally. A lot of people are asking me about what my favorite Lightroom features are. This is one of my #1 ones. I did this job with Walmart last year that had some of my favorite photos, like this one. And one thing I did is, in between the cities that I had to go to, I would get the photos uploaded and then edit them on the plane using my iPad, which is kind of like a weird first world thing to say, but editing on planes is something that has to happen for me. And the iPad is nice because I feel I can get into my photos more, not easily. I can get more into what I want to do using the pen, and being able to store locally is helpful because once you get everything ready to go, then you can have your edits. And then when you can get back on Wi-Fi, storing locally allows all those edits to be transferred over really simply.
All right, Aundre, real quick, looks like your camera is there. Oh, you just came back. Never mind. Keep going.
Sorry. Oh, nope, sorry.
Never mind. Keep going. So Claire is asking real quick, since I interrupted you, which version of Lightroom are you using? So Claire, there are 2 versions of Lightroom on the desktop. There's Lightroom Classic, the one that we've used for over 10 years, 14 years, somewhere around there. And then there's the newer version of Lightroom, the Lightroom, we used to refer to it as Lightroom CC, we just call it Lightroom now, and it would be the cloud-based version, the one that is still on the desktop, but it's the one that syncs dynamically across your desktop, mobile, web platforms, as well as your full resolution files are uploaded and synced and backed up.
Yes. What do I like about that? Just as a quick thing, I, A, don't tag my photos, and B, frequently have people ask me to get them a photo immediately. Depending on what storage level you're comfortable with, I don't want to pretend like things aren't expensive. One thing I used to do before I had more storage was I would just keep my last 3 months or 6 months worth of work, like all the raws, and then move over everything that wasn't like final selects. But it's a really nice way to keep myself organized. And for me, it allows me to have a very active backup. So I can have physical backups, digital backups, and then a backup that I don't have to be like, what catalog was this in, or where is this? To be clear, I still use Lightroom Classic depending on the job. But I really do like CC. And you'll see, especially with this Walmart stuff, I shot a lot of photos in many cities, and it's only the ones that we had for our final selects and ended up being in here. So
cool.
With that in mind, the other things I wanted to point out are this right corner. This lets you know how much you have synced, what your size is, what the plans are. It lets you figure out if you still have things being synced. I don't at the moment. Over here is your edit panel, which we're about to get into. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, because there was a little bit of confusion, there's a difference between a folder and an album. A folder is something that holds things, and an album is something that holds photos. So for example, when I finish a job, I always categorize everything as month, year, day, underscore client. And then when I'm done with the job, I will then put it in a finals folder with the final select. So that way, when I'm clearing out the first thing, it's not an issue. And then you'll see that all these say shared underneath them. One other thing that I like about this is you can share and invite people, and they can see a web link where they can comment and like things. So sometimes people will have notes like, hey, can you get rid of this thing on my face or whatever it is? And it's easier to work directly in the app, because then you can see what the likes and comments are specifically on each image right then and there. So that is my little pitch for it. Go ahead, Terry. You seem like you have something.
Yeah. So one of the things that people tend to get confused with in the album/folder paradigm is that albums, well, let me rephrase that. You would only get confused if you were using the previous version of Lightroom. If you were using Lightroom Classic, then albums and folders are confusing because they're different. Yes. They're called different things in Lightroom Classic. Yes, so if you're a Classic user, albums are the exact same thing as collections. So just think they're one-to-one. If you're talking albums in Lightroom Cloud, you're talking collections in Lightroom Classic. However, folders in Lightroom Classic are physically folders. They're where you store your images on the hard drive. In Lightroom, the cloud version, folders are what we would call in Classic collection sets. So they're folders of albums. So that's what makes it real confusing, is because folders are two different things in both applications, but albums and collections are the exact same thing in both programs.
100%. And that's really important. I know that for some of y'all that have been using all this, you're probably like, geez, let's get into the color stuff. And I totally want to. I just want to make sure that everyone
you have time. So it's not everyone not everyone's at the same level of skill. So it's great that you're doing a quick overview, and then you can get into the meat of it.
So we get back to all photos. Other things to keep in mind. Down here allows you to select what your how you want to see everything. So your photo grids, you can choose one giant photo. Also over here, this is another way to organize based on your capture date, import date. So capture date's when the metadata of the camera tells you it's there. Import date's when you brought it into Lightroom. Modified date, I think, is when it edited. Terry, feel free to correct me there.
That is modified date. So when it was last edited or modified, yes. When it was last changed. File
name, star rating. Stars and flags, you guys already know. And then over here allows you to change how big the thumbnails are. I know that on the iPad and on the tablet and the phone version, you can just pinch and zoom. Down here has your tags, and then this is info. And then the info is really important for you to figure out. So next time someone says, what camera would you take that on? You can screenshot this and save yourself the time and stress. All right, so that's kind of your basic setup. Oh, one more thing that is not really obvious in the desktop version. You can type in edited up here, and you can see if you edited a photo or not, which is actually something I really like to do. If you're looking for a specific photo and maybe there's two versions of it, or you took a couple photos back to back, you can just search for the edited and non-edited versions inside of your albums. So since you guys are very special to me, I made a folder called Streaming. And then inside that folder, I have an album called Curves and Color Mix. So what we're actually going to do first is talk about the edit panel. So we're going to pick this photo of a musician I took for Red Bull Radio a while ago on a Sony that wasn't mine. So when it loads, it might be a tiny bit. Oh, there we go. Actually, it's sharp. I'm not worried about it. So looking through this really fast, when we hit this edit panel, this little guy with these toggles, up here's our histogram. Our histogram, and I'm sure Terry can also explain this probably better than I can. It is essentially a graph of the light values in the image. You're seeing a blue, a red, and a green because those are the values that you can see. This little guy in the corner turns on your highlight clipping, let you know it's too bright, and you can tell that's super bright. Exposure, we all know what that is, bright and dark. Contrast is easy to see. Highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. Terry, how would you describe the difference between the highlights and shadows and whites and blacks For me, I would say that the highlights and shadows are the brightest and darkest parts of the image that are in these corners, and the whites and blacks, I think, do a lot of the same things, but also specifically deal with the whites and the blacks, not just the darkest parts of the image, which could be other colors.
All right, here's another way to think about it, just because as you were asking me, I was like, how would I explain it? Think about it this way. Let's say you had a white wall. So it's like a white wall on the side of a building. And then the sun was shining on it and creating a hot spot right on the middle of that wall. That hot spot would be the highlight. The wall would be the whites.
Yep.
So the whites and blacks actually have usually have pixel values. They usually have color values that you can you still want to maintain. Whereas the highlights, it's just really the luminance values across those pixels. So that's the way I would explain it.
Nice. Great. So we have this. We're going to talk about this curve.
One more thing, it's sometimes referred to as specular highlights. So like those super bright areas caused by reflections in the sun.
Okay. Nice. I will say we did not practice this, but this is a good example because this is a highlight in this top left corner of the sky, and then his shirt is a white. So, and yes, I know I picked a photo that the white balance is off. There's a reason for this. Please do not
I'm keeping my mouth closed. I'm not going to say a word.
You know, I'm sure someone's like, why did he pick this photo? I went through and picked some unedited photos and picked the photos I had edited and brought them back for this. So the main thing we're going to be dealing with today is this curve, this color, the color panel, which you can collapse with this little arrow or open up. Right now we have the color mixer open. This is how you bring it away. Effects is cool. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but not as much. But let's get into this. So the first thing that I noticed about this image after I took it was that since it wasn't my camera and I ran outside with it, that the white balance is off. The white balance is the temperature of the photo. And unless you are in some sort of club, generally you don't see things that are super blue like this. And the big tip is how blue his shirt is.
I just caught that, unless you're in some kind of club. So, only you, Aundre.
Listen, man, I'm just saying, look, you live in Atlanta. I'm over here being good. So, if you're ever unsure, you can come over here and use this white balance selector. And what you're doing is you're selecting what's supposed to be white in the image. And you want to actually, so the difference between what Terry was saying between highlights and whites is really important here, because you don't want to pick a highlight for your white spot because it won't have any data. It'll be too bright. So for example, in this video that you see of me, Terry, if you can make me big for a second, on my left side, you'll see how bright it is because there's light coming in. So over here is blown out. Over here is a highlight. Behind me directly is a white wall. So that's white. This is a highlight. So if for whatever reason the white balance of this image wasn't right, that if, well, let's say Terry took a photo of me right now, we'd want to select the color based on the wall, not based on this, because there's no data over here. You guys on plants look like no plant is this bright. So you can see how bright it is, but if I bring it closer to us, you'll see how much more detail we get. So this is essentially what we're going to be doing. And so we wouldn't pick, we wouldn't choose the white from over there, because from over there, there's not enough data for Lightroom to be able to make a decision about your white balance. And that's the best way I can describe it. So getting back to the image, you'll see that this is super blue. So if I select this white balance selector like we talked about, it's an eyedrop tool. Come over here and just click this. Oh, I need to pick a darker neutral area. Now we're seeing it and it's like went in the other direction. It's a little more pink. It's a little more yellow, or it's a lot more yellow. And I like that. It's closer to white, but I don't love it. So we're going to go back to this. One way that you could do this is just by sliding the color temperature yourself. So you start to brighten things up, and you'll see how his face is starting to change to look like a regular person. And I'm so sorry. This is a musician, and I do not remember their name, but I'm sure someone will remind me later. And yes, he has a chain on that is the plank from Ed, Edd n Eddy. But as you brighten it up, you're starting to see it's still a little pink. So let's add a little bit of green. and we're getting closer to white. Now these, this highlight is still a little bit strange. So something that I could do instead is also, if you want to go back ever, you can just double click and it'll go back to the original. We might want to approach it on this curve. So there are 4 curve options here, and then this little guy over here. There's a tone curve, and the way you want to read this is your bottom corner are your shadows, your blackest blacks. You see how it says shadows here? And as you start to go up, it says darks, it says lights, and it says highlights. So this middle square is the range of where most of the things are in your image. This bottom square are the shadows, the darkest part. So you could alter those by just sliding this slider up and down. But some people want more control, and that's what the tone curve's about. And so we want to start with this super hard thing, and then that way we can appreciate all the easy things afterward. So these are our darkest darks. These are our brightest brights. This is our median. The tone curve, for me, I think when you choose a point and start to edit it, it generally, I think, has more localized control than if I were to pick a point on the tone curve and just pull. It's almost like there's a give and take. It's like a rubber band for the tone. The next one over is called the point curve. So as you can imagine, there's points. You can add points and do all sorts of stuff. And they're essentially the same curve. You have different control on them, over them. After this, we have our red, our green, and our blue. Something to think about if you think, and shout out to Rob Sylvan for bringing this up to me, RGB is what you see on the internet, and CMYK is how you print. So if you put them next to each other, red and cyan are a part of the same channel. So as you add more red, you're reducing cyan. Or if you're taking red away, you're adding cyan. I'm just going quick, we're gonna come back. Same thing for the green. We add green, we're getting rid of pink. And if we add pink, we're getting rid of green. Everything is a push and a pull. And if you ever make a point you don't like it, you can just delete it. Oh, no, you can't. Sorry. Yeah, you double click it to delete it. So, like we said, this is a little blue. We can literally just pull this down, and we're starting to see how it warms up. And now some of you are like, didn't you just do the same thing on temp? Like, why are we doing it over here? I don't know. Some people like to do it this way, and this is what everybody has to look at. So we're going to talk about it like this. So you can see that as you're pulling, different parts are being altered based on where this point is. So down here are your like deep shadows. And then up here are your highlights. So now we've kind of taken a look, but we're going to talk about my very favorite tool that will help this all make a lot more sense. When you click on this guy over here, all the way in the corner underneath this toggle. Terry, what's the official name of this?
I can't see it. Hang on, I'll pull it up. Hold on. Keep going.
What you can do is as you move around, it'll tell you where on the point curve what you're looking at is. Where's that value? What's going to be impacted? So let's say that I'm like, man,
well,
you know
what you just described was an eyedropper, so I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about.
Oh, no, not the eyedropper. It's on the point curve. Oh, what is this called? I literally don't remember the name of it, but it's
target
great.
Selection?
There it is. So as you move along, you'll see, like we talked about, the top right corner are your brightest brights, and your bottom left are your darkest darks. So as we go through these spots that are super dark, you're seeing where on the curve would be affected. Now you're like, why does this matter? Because on this point curve, we can make really specific adjustments. So let's say we're like, man, I'm sick of his shirt looking like this. Or you know what? Even better. I think his skin looks too blue. So we like that spot. We clicked in, and then you'll see now there's a point on the curve that just magically appeared. Why is that? Because now it's saying this is the thing that we want to edit. So this range around his face is from this bottom darkest darks to around this blacks. So if we were to put the same curve here, and then work from this middle portion, you'll see how just that part that we selected is getting a little bit warmer. So, but like I said, as you move the point curve, you'll see how responsive it's being. Everything is moving. So you can add more points and like make, let's say for some reason we wanted him to look blue on one part and warm on the other. I'm not saying we should do that. But as you're moving all these points, you're seeing what's getting moved. So all of a sudden, this whole highlight region, which is up here, and you can see it as we're moving, you see how this is like kind of moving along. That's all warm now. We don't want that. So we're going to just go ahead and get rid of this guy. So although I personally would just warm this up, if for some reason, like I know a lot of us really like that cross-process look, a good way to do it is by selecting the area that you want to be a certain color using your target selection. Then cutting to that point, or even sliding up from it a little bit, and editing through that spot, you'll see how you can add in the color specifically to that area. And the thing I really like about this design is you can see, hey, I'm going up, I'm adding blue. Hey, I'm going down, I'm adding yellow. And like I said, it's responsive, so you obviously don't want to be like making anything wild because, or you can, this is an aesthetic people have done before. But if you're trying to make subtle changes, when you move, just pay attention to how the rest of the curve moves. The good news is you're not limited to just having 3 points. You can have points all along. And like you can think about this almost in a mode of crimping. Every point that I make along the way, if I move this center point, these two are going to act as anchors. So as I move up or down, you'll see that the only thing that's really moving along this curve, well, it was a line and that we made a curve, are the lines that are between, let's say this is, let's call this 1, 2, and 3. We're moving 2. Anything past 1 and 3 isn't really going to be as affected. So you're like, okay, whatever, we've done a bunch of stuff. Let's look at the difference. This is before, this is after. Now, I don't think this is the greatest photo in the world. I think it's a little green up here, but I definitely think his shirt looks better. I think one mistake I made here is that I didn't stop down enough. So here in his shirt, there's not enough detail. And let's head over here and say that, hey, I think there's a little bit too much pink here. So we're going to go back, select this tool again. We're going to look and see, okay, we think he's a little pink over here. Let's say his shirt right here is pink. So we'll select this point and this point. We'll pick another point in the middle, add a little green, and we're seeing how it's impacting his skin because here, this is here on his face is also part of this area. So here for this, maybe if I didn't like this, instead I would open this in Photoshop and select this actual area. I don't know if you had a thought, Terry, about what you would do, but for me there, if I didn't like the shadow that was being cast here after I played with tint, I might just take this into Photoshop and clean this little region up, which I can do too.
Well, is it that you don't like the color of it, or you don't like that it's there?
It's more that I don't like the color of it. What I could do also is select it and then just desaturate this one little area because it is white and black, but didn't want to get too far ahead of myself.
Yeah, if it's you could also try an adjustment brush in that one area.
Oh yeah. We got a little ahead of ourselves, but I'm going to do it anyway. Over here, after edit, there's crop, which we all know what that does. Healing brush, which is pretty great. I wouldn't advise trying to take off all his face tattoos, but you can use it for blemishes and actually quite a few things. And then over here, there's this thing called an adjustment brush. And the first thing you notice is that plus sign. If you think about a regular brush, in the very middle of where you add the paint is where the paint's the strongest, and the edges it's a little bit weaker. So it's like almost a concept of a feather. You can change the size with keyboard shortcuts, or over here where it says size. I'm sure some of you guys are like, yeah, I know, I see it. And what I can do is I can just paint this area, and if I go over it a lot, you'll see that this is getting darker. That lets me know what's being impacted. As we go through, let's just paint the spot a little bit. I think that's a little pink, so I might add some green to it. And then I can also move the edit around if I want to see what it looks like in other areas. But now we've kind of did the same thing, but in a more specific area. And we have a photo that I feel better about. And basically, we used to use these at Red Bull Radio to promo artists that would come in the daytime to talk. So we would take the photo, and then like 10 minutes later, it'd be up on Twitter. So these were a lot of quick edits. I'm not sure. I'm sure I didn't end up using this image. I just probably used one after I fixed the white balance. But that is our first tiny color foray. Mr. White, do you have anything to add before we go to another image?
Yeah, I would just add one more thing for the white balance that you started out with. I mean, all the curve stuff, that's all right on the money, everything you talked about. The only thing I would probably just as a recommended tip for the white balance, because it depends on the image. The white balance eyedropper is the first thing you should be looking for in an image for something to click on is something that's neutral gray. So something that is around 18% gray or just gray in general. That would be the first thing you do. But of course, not every image is going to have gray in it. So therefore, it's not something you're going to always be able to find to click on. So Aundre's second solution was the second thing I look for is something that should be white or something that should be black. And I keep emphasizing should be because in the current photo, it might not be. It might be bluish. It might be greenish. It might be yellow. But if you look at that, wait, that's a white shirt. It's just the wrong color. So I'm looking for something that should be white. So in that photo, the thing I probably would have tried to click on first was the street because the street should have been gray. So I would have, the asphalt of the street, that's what I would have done. But otherwise, no, you're right on the money.
Let's find a photo that we like. You know what? Let's keep it on something we've all seen. This is a New York street. Let's get one we like a little better. This is a group photo. We've all taken group photos before. This is a lovely group of artists. They're based in New York. Also names escape me because I remember nothing. But one first thing we're looking at is, okay, cool, this photo's fine. It's not the greatest photo ever taken. It's not the worst photo ever taken. But the first thing coming to mind is I shot this with like a little too shallow of an aperture because you're having a hard time seeing the people in the back. That's okay. But I'm having a hard time seeing this gentleman's face. And honestly, his face is fine, but for everyone else, they're just a little bit in shadow. He has a little bit of he has like a visor on. And so since it's not like a super bright day, and because I put them in a shadow, we're in a weird spot. So how would we deal with that in curves? So we talked about the darkest darks being down here, right? This is an interesting time to bring it up, but I know a lot of people love that like faded film look where there's not really a true black. One thing you could do here is your black value is here. This is what it says it's black. Notice, oh, this is important. So sorry, y'all. Up here on the histogram, notice what happens when you move the curve around. So remember the histogram is a graph of your light values. As we move the black point up, you're seeing the whole histogram shifting to the right, which means it's saying, no, your new black is here. So now this image is getting nice and flat, which sometimes can be helpful because if you look at what our difference is from here to here, there's less contrast, but we can see everything we want. I'm not saying this is a solution for everything, but at times it can be helpful to flatten an image out. There's oftentimes we're taking photos in the middle of the day. We're all graduating from college and high school and taking those like terrible photos that are like you're capping down, shadow of all shadows of your face. And sometimes that can help. So for me, a lot of times I actually will come up and gray out my image a little bit and then start from there. So our blackest blacks are here. Now let's say, all right, I'm still not satisfied. I can't see this guy's face as well. Over time, you get more comfortable and you definitely know where everything is. But until you do, and I still use this, you go ahead and click on our selective tool. Sorry. And I see that his face is right here in this zone. So I'm going to go to the edge of the zone, open up a dot, and you can see everyone else is in here. Add another dot here. As you see, we bring it down, we're getting more contrast. We bring it up, it's getting a little too flat. Now it's starting to gray out. So, hold on. Bring us up a little bit. So you can see that I may have added just a little bump here, but now I can see everyone's face so I want to. Now that may not be what you want. Let's get rid of all this. Let's get us back to where we were. Easy killer. And let's say we want to get like that like gritty New York high contrast thing. And what you want to do there is make an S curve. So let's make 3 points. Let's bring our brights up a little. Let's bring our brights down a little and our darks up a little. And we have an S. So now we can see the difference from our first image to our second. Give me a second. Where there's some contrast, but it's not super hard to see. Depending on the image, you want to try different things. So let's say we do the opposite. Let's bring our brights up some more. I'm sorry, what I did was I inverted it. This is what, if you wanted to get like this kind of gritty New York look where you can only kind of see the New York cat, like nobody knows what's going on, but it looks cool. This is kind of like a little, my urge to hit delete is very silly. You should always just double tap these. I could also bring the whole thing up. So there's some contrast, it's less flat. And we now have, it kind of looks like a bow where I brought all my values, my light values up and my dark values up. So by bringing my light values up, you're going to see over here is going to get brighter, over here is going to get brighter. But in this little space where the highlights are, we're actually still pretty true to the spot versus here in the midtones, which is that square we talked about, we've brought things up. The midtones is most of these things. The best way to think about it is this photo is in black and white, what would be gray? The midtones, like this square region, is where that would be gray. Terry, is there a way for me to, because I know in Lightroom Classic, I can change this to grayscale to see that, and I'm not sure I can do that in Lightroom. And I don't want to say that and then be inaccurate.
I don't, well, I'm looking at mine right now in gray, so it must be possible.
Okay, hold on.
But while you're looking for that, I do have a question from the chat. Marcy is asking, with the introduction of night shift mode in Apple products in the past couple of years, and given the fact that many people view photos digitally, how do you make tint decisions?
This is a good, like, Marcy asking me good questions. We went to college together and you're going to treat me like this? Unbelievable. That is a good question. So I will always make the decision to edit it true to color. So here we know this is pretty true to color because, let's turn this off, zoom in, we can see that his hat is white and it's supposed to be white. His Air Force One lows, white, his Presto Airs, white. Sorry, I like sneakers. So I will always make the decision to edit based on true like whites and blacks, because even with night shift, for the most part, people are still going to be looking at stuff for most of the day on their phones and regular temperature. And at night, every once in a while, I will notice it though. I'll edit something at night and then later be like, "Ooh, I made a mistake." And so I just try to be cognizant of it. But generally, since most people, the people I'm worried about are people that I'm trying to have hire me, and I can't tell them in a meeting that I didn't edit this right because I was thinking about night shift. So my general thought is to just keep it close to white. Some people like to edit a little bit warmer too because it feels more inviting. But that is a very good question. And for the people that are confused, night shift is that thing that most of our phones do past a certain time to protect our eyesight by just making things a little bit more blue. Is that correct, Mr. White?
Well, there's two things you're talking about. So there's night shift, which is what you're referring to just now, and then there's the night mode for the photography, taking pictures in the dark. So it depends on which one. And let's see, she was asking about night shift. So she was asking about the one you just described. So whereas night shift is going to make the screen a little yellower, a little warmer. So how would you adjust based on someone's screen really not being the true colors in the first place. And I like your explanation. I would stick to the true colors because I can't control. Some people are going to look at it with night shift on, some aren't. So I can't. So I'm gonna. I can't. I don't know what you're going to look at it in. So I'm going to stick to the colors that look good under normal situations. And if you're looking at it in night shift, then you already know everything on your phone's warmer.
Yeah.
That would be the way I would approach it.
That brings up a good point, and we're going to talk about curves more, but I actually want to bring up something that I completely forgot I wanted to talk about today, which I'm embarrassed about. We're going to slide down here.
Now, before you move on, so your curve question, I was just playing around with the tone curve here in Lightroom.
Yep.
You have your red, green, and blue, which that's going to give you your color histogram, so to speak. And then you have the RGB value, the second dot, so to speak. That's what's going to show it in grayscale because you're adjusting all of it.
Okay.
And with your target, you're going to see your target as you drag it in color as well. Here, as a matter of fact, I got a good example here. Let me switch to my screen just for a second.
Show us. Right. Show us while I get these pictures.
Right here. So this is what the area I was talking about. So in your point curve in Lightroom Cloud version, you've got this dot, which is adjusting the overall colors. You've got your red. So it's showing me the reds. It's showing me the greens. It's showing me the blues. But when you are working with the targeted adjustment,
okay,
turn
there
it
it
off.
Is. There it is.
And you come over to your yellow flower and make your adjustment. See how it's changing the actual slider to yellow because it knows what's being adjusted, and it's also automatically picking the area of the photo to adjust. So if I were to go here and maybe come over here and do that. Since I'm on the reds, it's only adjusting the reds in the photo, which of course is adjusting the overall photo because all the colors make up the colors we see. But if I tone down the reds, then I'm going to get more of the yellows and greens, so to speak. So the histogram can be worked on as the way Aundre was showing you. It could be worked on with and that's probably the way people work on it the most because they're then dictating the values based on the histogram. Where they want to make the adjustments because you're seeing the peaks and the valleys, so you know where the data is, and you're able to make your adjustments accordingly as he showed you.
And the histogram is cool, but remember, your eye is what brought you here. So we're not here to tell you like you should or shouldn't be doing anything. We just want you to know, like, hey, this is how you can play with stuff. So Terry brought up a good point, and I was going to do it later because I wanted to do it hard and then do it easy, but we're going to do it this way now. So we're going to get back to this photo that we're used to. So let's say, for example, like I said, I was really bothered I couldn't see his face. So here,
your screen's pixelated.
Strange. Apologies, y'all. We are hardwired. We're doing our best.
Yeah. Try a different photo real quick. Because it's really just the center of the screen mostly. So it's like the photo itself. Hang on, let me go back to mine. And then go back to yours. Nope, yours is still pixelated. You might need to, worst case scenario, refresh that browser that has the desktop in it.
Okay. In this time,
I don't know if that's going to kick you off, though.
We'll have to talk about our
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back. You're back.
Like a podcast.
Yeah.
We'd like to spend a small amount of time telling you about our favorite trash compactor. I'm just kidding. So let's get back to this tone selector. So let's say I was really bothered by this, and I can see the curves over here, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to take matters in my own hands. Let's get this back to this point curve. I'm going to pick this point here. I'm going to pull on this point. And I want to make this brighter for some reason. Oh, sorry. You know what? I need to flatten this curve out again because I've forgotten I'd already edited it. Okay. I see this spot. I want him to brighten up. And as I'm brightening him up, obviously you're seeing what I told you. That was a black value, and you're seeing the curve rise and fall. So I picked a bad spot. Let's pick a different spot. Let's say that I want, let's see. I just want to see his arm a little better. His skin tone seems a little dark. I can start to slide up, and you're seeing how it's taking that point and just brightening it. So obviously this is a little bit easier and more responsive, but I wanted to talk to you about the curves first because you're seeing now how that point we selected things are moving up and down. But as we're doing it, we're going up so much that now in this top right corner where the highlights are, they're coming up. So you're looking into the sky, and all of a sudden that white that you thought was white is even brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And if we look at the difference, even before you had more detail in that background. So being able to select multiple points allows you to keep the edits you want and not worry about anything crazy up here. Now, let's say that we're just like, you know what, I like it. I don't want to have to keep doing points on it. We can just select one point, bring it up like we did, and then we can go back to our friend the adjustment brush like Terry showed us, and click on it, bring it over, and then we can just paint in this sky. And so you'll see the first time I painted in, it's not super dark, and that the darkness of the red shows you how much it'll be affected. So you can go over it again and again, or you can turn up the fill, but I need to find where that is and show you. So let's say we didn't really love how we did that. This is a pretty bright spot, so instead of going on exposure, I would actually choose to bring the highlights down until we're in a spot that we like. So let's bring them down a little bit.
Yeah, you might want to zoom in on the photo just so we can see the difference better.
Oh, sorry. Ooh, how do I zoom all the? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, just click them. It should be able to click right in the photo, doesn't it? Zoom. Yeah, there we go.
Well, because usually my keyboard shortcut for zooming is the same one that I'm using now for the brush is my confusing point. And I would also zoom.
I see what you're saying.
Hold on, y'all. Let me just turn this brush off.
There you go.
That'll help. And then we'll go back to the brush.
And then you go back to brushing.
And we're here.
Isabella, welcome. Glad that you're new here on Behance, and they've already given you what's going on here, but this is Aundre Larrow. My name is Terry White, and we're editing photos. Welcome to Adobe Live.
It's Dr. Terry White to you. I'm just kidding. I don't know why I said that.
That's only to you.
He has a little nameplate. So yeah, I painted this in, and now just to show you, let's just like be crazy with it. We can move it around like we said, and then we can also like, hold on. Okay. Easy killer. So we see the point. We can make it anything we want. Terry, how do I get out of the... This is so interesting because now I'm so used to using on the iPad that I like completely forgot. And maybe we should do more iPad tomorrow. But I want to show...
What?
Oh, it's just... Oh. Yeah. So you'll see how I can change the tint, how it's getting bluer or more yellow. So like even this could be kind of interesting. Like let's say I was taking a photo of Manhattan Henge. For my non-New York folks, that's that one time a year when the sun hits between the buildings in the middle of the city when it sets. And I wanted to get like a nice little like yellow burn on the edges of the highlights. And I'm going to zoom in to show you, which I'm sure Terry's about to tell me to do. So you can see here we have this like nice little yellow, which feels warm and inviting. And that could be an edit that we like. And we got that by painting everything in. And if we lost the point, we can always paint it again. We can add a new point wherever we see fit. Or we can end up kind of playing with all these other features. But since we're talking about color, I don't want to get too far off the rails. And since we're about an hour in, I just want to make sure everyone's feeling good and has any questions. Did I do anything too fast that was confusing? Or if anything, Terry, you want to talk about, correct on, etc. before we get into curves, talk about anything else?
Nope, you are good. I've been monitoring the questions and been throwing them at you as they've been coming, but this is a good point to, I do have something I need to talk about as a housekeeping rule. Not a rule, but just an announcement. So while you're looking for your next thing that you're going to work on, I'll...
Terry, sorry, this is hilarious.
I'll bring this up. All right,
Mr.
so So one of the things that we have fun. So one of the things that I'm reminded of when I see so many artists out here watching the streams, I see so many people watching. We have over 1,000 people watching us right now, and so now's a good time to talk about
1,000
this.
people are watching us right now.
Yeah, right now. So Aundre is one of our first Adobe Creative residents. And what year were you a resident?
I was a resident.
Was it 2 years ago?
Yes, we've done 2 cycles, and the new residents just came out.
Okay, so and that program is literally where you apply for it. If you're chosen, you get to be a resident for a year. You get to work on your projects. It's a paid gig, so you're contracted or technically almost employed by Adobe for a year, and that's great. However, we realize that there are literally tens of thousands of you that we just won't have enough room for all the people that would want to be a resident. So one of the things that we did this year, especially in response to what's going on in the world today, is we created an Adobe Creative Residency Community Fund. And so what that is the community team at Adobe, the community team has put together a $1 million community fund aimed at providing resources to the negatively impacted by COVID. So the project will run the entirety of 2020, so there's no rush to apply. Not all that apply will be selected for creatives, but will be selected. But creatives can apply for project funding or commissions through Adobe. So those selected will receive a one-time grant to pursue a 2 to 4 week project. And I'm going to share that link for you guys in the chat right now. So this is another call out. If you are watching this on any other platform, you're not going to see this link. You can go find it, but you're not going to see this link because I can only post it in the one chat that we're looking at on Behance. So now would be the chance to head over to behance.net/Adobe Live. And that way you can participate and not only in the chat, but you also get this link for the program that I just posted. So the Creative Residency Community Fund, a $1 million fund to help creatives during this time. Anyone can apply. You can get a grant to work on a project for 2 to 4 weeks. And if selected, you'll get the money to work on your project. So that's just one of the ways that we're giving back during this time. All right, and now we're going to go back to Aundre.
Yeah, heck
and
yeah.
Back to your desktop.
I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Shivani. She reminded me to look into the camera sometimes. Sorry, I'm like looking at the second screen excitedly. Just to echo what Terry said, the residency is cool because it gives you the opportunity to kind of pass the hurdle, one of the main hurdles of getting what you need, which is funding to pay for a project. And the process of pitching is, I found it really, really helpful because it has you get your ideas together in a way that sometimes is difficult for personal projects. So I definitely encourage you to apply. I know they're doing rolling admissions, so people are being accepted every month. And since this is such a strange time, if you think there's a project you can work on and you want to work on it, like take advantage of it. Look, we're tired. It's hard to stay motivated. I don't want to tell you what you need to be doing with your time, but if you have time and you want to work on something and your state allows you to leave your home or whatever it is, then do it or work on something at home. But as one of my favorite artists, Tyler the Creator, says, find some time to do something. So really thank you guys for coming. I'm literally surprised 1,000 people are in here and that it's been an hour and you guys haven't decided to revolt. But we're talking about color editing and we're going to get back into it. And so I wanted to show another example of just doing lights and darks. So we're going to pull up a photo of my friend Kurt at Cosmic Insanity on Instagram. If anybody wants to follow him, he's the best. We're going to give a second for it to get in. So you'll see this is pretty soft. I think I probably shot this at 1.8 or so, but you'll see that you got to give it a second because I'm streaming and, trying to FaceTime my mom at the same time or whatever. If we get back over here, you'll see that it's a pretty shallow depth of field. So just one of his eyes is sharp and everything else kind of falls back, even the brim of his hat. So normally I would maybe hop in here. I wouldn't brighten it up this much. That'd be unacceptable. I'd brighten him a little bit. We could bring our contrast up. Maybe I wanted to see some more of his hair, bring his shadows down or up. But instead, we're actually going to go back into curves. We're down in our point curve over here. I know that I think these darks are a little too dark, so I'm going to bring them up from this region. So we're getting a lot of that same motion we saw before with exposure with a slight bit more control. We're going to move it over a little bit and up. I actually like the highlights where they are, so I'm going to keep this dot here so that it doesn't bend much more. And then let's bring these midtones up a little bit more. And so you're seeing that we're not blowing out his face in the same way as when I was done. So we're going to get rid of these guys as when I was just brightening, right? So we'll bring these points back. And so we're here, and sometimes this control is really helpful. Not every photo needs to be a raw photo taken on a Hasselblad digital large format ready to be printed in the MoMA. And so not every photo needs to have curves on it, but there's times when you might want to have a really specific level of control, and that'll help you. So between our curves and our linear brush, we're in a really good spot to make really specific edits that we like. So this photo of Kurt I actually really like. I don't want to do too much to it. We have it a little brighter. Let's add this guy in a little bit. And so now I actually want to, I'm going to pick not this photo because it's too subtle. I want to show you guys the color mix, which is my favorite tool. And we will be going over all of this again tomorrow, but I just want to really drive it home. Here's a photo I took on set for a McDonald's commercial. It was actually really fun. We did the scene where we cracked open a fire hydrant and kids got to jump in the water, and it was a very hot day, so it was honestly really rad. But you can see there's like all these poles and things that go into making a commercial never cease to amaze me. Sorry, then 1 second. Then earlier, I actually, if any of you've seen that Nissan commercial where the kid says like, "Don't sass me" to his mom, this is that same kid playing basketball with a postal worker. Give me a second. It's taking a minute. Yeah, the like story behind this was a postal worker like helping out the community. Anyway, back to what we were doing. So just to drive it home, we are here. We're going back to our tone curve. We're feeling good. We know this whole photo is dark. There's not really anything in here we're worried about blowing out. So why don't we just start from our midtones, just bring this whole baby up. So you're seeing as it comes up, kids are in a good spot. Maybe we don't really love this photo in itself, but something else I'd probably do, I wanted to point out, we can go to crop. We'd rotate. The reason why I know this photo isn't straight is because these lines, and I took it really quickly. So take it here.
Oh, wait, you know what? That brings up, so a bit of photography history trivia from an editing standpoint. Ooh. And I never thought about it until you just showed this particular example. If you, when he first brought this up, you noticed, and you said it, the entire photo's dark. Well, back in the day, if the entire photo were dark, your choice in most applications were brightness and contrast. Remember those sliders from way back when, if you've been around long enough? And they were horrible because brightness would brighten the entire photo. It would brighten the midtones, the shadows, the stuff that was already bright enough, and then you would try and compensate for it with contrast. And just what you just said, by dragging just the midtones, means that my photo won't get destroyed because I'm leaving the highlights and shadows right where they are. I'm making the important parts of the photo brighter, but I'm leaving the highlights and shadows where they need to be. And so you just made me realize that's why brightness and contrast was so bad back in the day, is because it was brightening everything, or it was darkening everything, and you didn't have a choice.
Which is crazy, but it's cool. So like even now we'd say maybe it's still a little muddy, but we're in a point now where we can edit it a little bit more intelligently. And so I'm a little younger than Terry, so I don't know everything that he's talking about, but there are definitely times when I'm like, yeah, this didn't work. So yeah, here making an S curve maybe isn't the best idea. But for example, if I put this point over here, like I showed you guys, and I bring this up, what am I brightening? look how the fence is changing, but the kids aren't, right? Because if we go back to our point select, we'll see where these kids sit, which is in this side. And so we still want them to be bright, but we don't want to keep making this fence so bright that it's like blinding. So let's get down to between those two things here. We have a point selected, and now let's bring it up. And so you're seeing is we're getting to the point of brightness where it's flattening a little bit. So maybe we want to move a little bit further away from our darkest darks and try this again. But we are getting something. I actually think I took this on my phone. Yeah. Looking at this now. Go ahead, Terry.
Good shot. So Carolyn Brown's asking, when you're comfortable with curves, do you never use sliders? And no, it's the opposite. For what Aundre's doing, and there's an art to it, and people have used curves for decades. And there are people that swear by curves, and there are people that don't want to touch a photo until they can use curves. Yep. What curves taught me were to appreciate all the other sliders.
100%. Because, and that was what I was trying to say. We're only doing this because people ask, and because no one,
because people always want to know how to use curves. But I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit, I rarely ever use curves anymore because I don't have to. Back when you had to, when all you had was brightness and contrast or curves, then curves made all the difference in the world because you were able to have more control. So what I like about curves still is I get to see where the data is, where the peaks and valleys are to make my adjustments. But in most cases, I've got sliders called shadows, blacks, whites, highlights. Why wouldn't I exposure? Why wouldn't I just use those? So again, this is all personal preference. People grew up on one thing or the other. It doesn't mean I'm never going to use sliders. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. I'm going to use sliders more. But I love what curves can do. And I don't knock anyone for using them because it was where you're comfortable.
Yeah, and what you know how to do kind of helps you appreciate what goes from there. So sometimes a lot of us shoot now in a way that we're comfortable editing with. So for example, back to this Walmart commercial, something I do like about the occasional times when I get to shoot on set is there's this beautiful sun and they have a huge scrim, which is essentially like a taut curtain. And it gives you this really lovely soft light that runs over them in this way. So it has this really nice like rim feeling. Everything looks beautiful. And so I know that I want to shoot with them into the sun because then I can get that brightness that I like. And you guys can see, since I shot into the sun, there's still all this detail and only this rim is being affected. Or only this rim is getting super, super bright. The rest of it's kind of coming out. And since we talked about midtones, and we're going to just touch on this in effects. We're not going to go too crazy into it. Terry knows one of my very favorite things is clarity. I don't think that clarity replaces sharpening, but I think sometimes it does what we hope sharpening will do, where it just adds a little bit of punch to those midtones. And the midtones, if we forgot, is this little square here that most of the things in the image set to. And when I say most, if you look at the graph, you'll see in this image, there's almost no blacks. So over here, there's nothing. And the peaks or the whites are over here. And it's essentially what you're looking at is a graph of all the light values in the image. And you don't need me to tell you that this image is very bright. So I know that what I'm saying is I know that I like to shoot this way. So I will shoot with them into the sun so that I can then give it this like halo effect versus shooting the other way, which I think might be flat. But some people shoot that way and it looks awesome. So it depends on the person.
All right. So we got a question from Anthony, and I'll answer my way, and Aundre, you can, of course, answer it your way as well. So here's the question. Terry and Aundre, do you use Lightroom as your primary resource for general editing of photos and Photoshop as a secondary editing tool? Which program do you use more for photo editing? So here's my take on it. And I can't take credit for this. I heard someone else say it, and I've been using it ever since. I use Lightroom to develop my photos. I use Photoshop to edit them. Sometimes a photo only needs to be developed. It doesn't need anything else. So the sliders, the adjustment brush, if I can get away with doing it all there, I'm done. I don't need to go into Photoshop just for the sake of going into Photoshop. But if I want to remove a lot of things in the photo, like distractions. If I want to do some warping, if I want to do liquefy, if I want to do some serious retouching, if I want to do compositing, if I want to add text, if I want to do anything creative, that's when I'm heading to Photoshop. I want to combine 2 photos or 3 photos together. I want to remove a background. These are all things that Lightroom either can't do or is not very good at, if it could do it.
Yes.
So it's Lightroom first, and I stop if I'm done. But if it needs more, then that's when I go to Photoshop. So it's Lightroom to develop, Photoshop to edit. Aundre, your take?
I agree. And in case everyone's curious, you can hit this little, sorry, I just punched my watch on the door, or not on the door, on the desk. You can right click and there's a thing called edit in Photoshop. And something that's really nice about how this works is after you finish the edit, you close Photoshop and it goes right back over to Lightroom and it sits right there for you. So for me, I remember the first time I ever saw Lightroom, I was in college. I was graduating and didn't have a lot of money, and I was taking a ton of graduation photos. So every day, the last 3 weeks of school, I was shooting at sunrise and sunset. So I would like get up, shoot, sleep, shoot, edit, sleep, and kind of did that cycle, and was making like some laughable amount of money because I thought it was cool to charge people $60 to work for several hours. Whatever, judge me, I was 20. And so I remember I was just hitting these batch edits repeatedly, actions on Photoshop. And we were in the photo lab at school because I was a journalism major. And my friend Javier came in and he was like, "Hey, man, what do you do? Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Why don't you just use these in Lightroom? You don't have to." You don't have to like sit and run this action for like forever. You can edit everything together. You can even like on the develop slider or the you can just move the stuff in unison or lock it together. And I remember when he showed me that, I was like, wow. And I never kind of went back. For me, I don't really use Bridge much. Terry might, I'm not sure. I actually like Lightroom to keep everything organized. When I have needs for specific edits, I bring it into Photoshop. And so maybe you don't use Photoshop. Maybe you put text on in Adobe Spark. Maybe you just use Photoshop for like, I know my cousin Malik, who's watching, I appreciate him. He makes a lot of GIFs using Photoshop and like memes and stuff. So everything serves a different purpose. But with Lightroom, primarily it is developing and organization. And then kind of keeping everything organized, like I said. So like together, ready for sharing. But Lightroom or Photoshop is like especially if like a client needs something retouched, like I need to just smooth over someone's skin. Like there's a photo of my friend Janelle. She's awesome. I don't know if anybody loves SVU. I love SVU, and she was on SVU recently. She's a Broadway singer. She's awesome. And let's say this is for her headshot. I would go through and just make sure that these little points were nice and smooth. I would use the mixer brush after I went and did some point selections that like you can do a little bit of this in Lightroom, but I think it's easier in Photoshop and it feels more natural to me. And I'm really excited about it being available on the iPad because I think that being able to use the pen makes point selection so much more simple. So I don't know if that answers questions.
I think it does. And here's one more question along the same lines from Carolyn Brown. Do you round trip, which you already showed, Lightroom to Photoshop, but then back to Lightroom to color grade the picture after you edit it in Photoshop? And again, for me, it depends. Usually I've done a lot of that up front in Lightroom. So when I go to Photoshop, I'm doing the Photoshop things. When I leave Photoshop, I'm done. But have I ever started in Lightroom, gone to Photoshop, did what I need to do, come back to Lightroom, and then still tweak the final result more in the develop module or in the editing? Absolutely. So it depends on the photo. Sometimes I do that triple round trip, so to speak. Sometimes I just Lightroom to Photoshop back, I'm done. Lightroom to Photoshop back, do a little more, and then I'm done. It just depends on the photo.
Yep. And to clarify, tomorrow we'll be talking about curves a little bit. So today we're doing the inverse. We're talking about curves a lot and color mix a little bit. Tomorrow we're going to talk about color mix a lot and curves a little bit. And in between, we will be definitely talking about presets as well as profiles. So I was going to get into color mix, but I think this is actually a very good time to, let's pick a photo that's kind of unassuming. Okay, here's a photo that's an iPhone selfie on New Year's Eve. We're going to give it a minute to stop pixelating. With some of my favorite people, Chris and Lyd and everybody. When we go into the edit module, presets we're all used to.
It's doing that thing again. So whatever you did to clear it up last time, I think you went out and went back in and it was clear.
Give it a second.
Now it's clear. That's it. You did it.
And I'm choosing this photo. I know it's not a really cool photo or anything. I'm going to just use this one, and I'm going to use this one of my friend Meredith that I took when I was on Walking with Giovanni, who should also be in this chat, causing trouble. So here, give it a second, y'all. When we go to the edit module, presets are down here, and profiles are up here. Difference between a preset and a profile is that a profile is like a color temperature, or not a color. It's like every time I describe this, it's so fascinating. It's like the film you choose to put in your camera. It is your baseline. It alters what your kind of coloring is or what the overall mood of the photo is. And you can adjust the intensity, but that is about it. For the preset, when you click a preset, it moves all these sliders. So like, don't judge this madness. I got these Mastin ones after I did this program. And then I have my Visco ones from forever ago. But you'll see that if we pick, let's go to my friend Sam's Cinema Pack that Adobe has for free. I can link you to them in a minute.
Still got pixelization on your main image.
Okay. Hopping out.
It's weird when you go. Nope. It's weird when you went out last time and came back. Now it's all set, and now you're all set. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So presets, you'll see when you move them, or before you move them, as you go over, it'll show you on all the sliders we talked about what it's doing, right? It's moving things around, making edits. Your profiles won't do that, but your profile is your baseline. And I think often, since this is an iPhone photo, let's say I just want to toss this in, I wanted to post it on New Year's Eve. We took it right as the ball dropped. You'll see Happy New Year. I want to go to my profiles, and Terry, feel free if you have a different way to describe this. This has my favorites, the one I use the most.
Mm-hmm.
But we have some nice ones set in here. We'll go to our artistic ones. And you'll see that as you pick them, you're like, oh, this is kind of like a preset. Yes and no. It's like when you used to load your film camera, if you did that, you would choose between like the Kodak Ektachrome, which might be closer to the vintage, or a Portra, or something like that. So it's kind of like just differences. So you're seeing as these colors going through. So let's pick Modern 3, which I've used before. You can also adjust how much this changes your image. It's kind of like using a layer mask in Photoshop. And that intensity is kind of cool because often if I'm going to post this on New Year's, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to do anything else. It gives me a little contrast I want. It gives me a kind of a color palette I want. And honestly, it's a front-facing camera on an iPhone, so it's kind of a whatever photo. And that's okay. Photos are different things, and Lightroom does like to walk the line between being a heavy-duty professional piece of equipment and one that is easy for you to make the changes that you want. You can add other presets, other profiles, obviously, but this is your baseline, and I often use my profiles this way to select something that I think looks how I want it to, and then adjust the overall intensity, which I think is actually pretty cool and helpful because sometimes you just don't have time to be clicking through all this stuff. Terry,
right.
is there a way you describe it differently?
No, you're pretty much, I like the film analogy, but a lot of people are younger and they don't even remember what film is. So let's think of it this way. Even digitally, and I look at I use profiles mainly on raw images. And my analogy for that is that when you think about your camera raw, or your raw images coming out of your camera, you want them raw because you want them unprocessed. You don't want the camera to do anything to them other than capture the best picture it can from the sensor you have. But when you capture JPEG, your camera makes all kinds of decisions on how that JPEG should look. So it's applying color, it's applying sharpening, it's applying all kinds of things. And in most cameras today, there are even these settings you can make. Make it more vibrant. Make it look like it was taken in the club. Make it look like it was a sunset. So those are looks that you're applying to your photo right in the camera. So I look at profiles kind of the same way. I want my image to look a certain way to start out, like Aundre said, as a starting point. I want it to be more vibrant. I want skin tones to look good, so I'll use the portrait one. I want it to look like a great landscape, so I use the landscape one. And these are subtle changes to the way the photo looks without adjusting sliders. So even if you did all your sliders first and then you apply the profile, it wouldn't change your sliders. Or if you apply the profile and move your sliders later, it doesn't affect the profile, itself. You can always go back and change the profile. So one doesn't necessarily override the other. But just think of profiles as a look to a photo. And it could be artistic. It could be, you showed black and white. That was great. It could be just what you would have done if you were thinking in the film days, or what you would do as a starting point. But before we go on, before I let you continue editing, we have another couple housekeeping things. So for those of you who are just still joining us or just joining us now, we're almost done. We got about 30 minutes left before we head over to the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge. But earlier today, we had the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Ooh. So we're going to go take a look at some of those entries right now, and then we'll let Aundre get back to editing. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my desktop. And so the challenge for today in Photoshop. Yeah, you can switch your battery out and do what you need. But today's challenge was make 3D objects pop out of a 2D surface using layer mask and adjustment layers. So this was, don't use 3D, don't use like dimension or anything. Take a 2D image in Photoshop, but make it look more 3D with adjustment layers and, what was the other one? Adjustment layers and masks. All right, so I'm in Discord. I'm in our Photoshop Discord channel, and I'm going to take a look at some of these entries. I think I start at the top of where they are. There are 88 new messages, or 89, 88 new messages, so there are a lot more that have come in since I last looked. And I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through them. So keep in mind that these all started out as flat 2D images. I love the Terminator look to some of these. Nice golden liquid metal look. This is pretty cool. I love this one, even though I'm not a fan of snakes, but that's a cool snake shot.
What? Sorry, I don't like snakes either. That was kind of an aggressive reaction.
Not a fan of snakes. They exist. They're in nature, but not a super fan.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, here's a nice one. It looks like is that a camera? Looks like a camera. Very cool. And so I'm seeing a lot of what, again, looks like metal, looks like liquid, using some of these techniques. Good one with the warrior here. Looks like a shield. Is that Captain America? Yep. I see the Captain America shield there. Nicely done. I'm going to click on this one. Taking that 2D baseball trophy and making it look more metal, more 3D. Love this one. And the reason I love this one is because they left the skin alone. They basically just applied the treatment to the shoes. So good job there. Viva La Cuba. Good. Good, good, good. Let's see this butterfly. Very nicely done. That almost looks like jewelry. Very cool.
I know how to do that.
It's either two versions or before and after. I think it's two versions. If I were to pick one, I think I like the black and white one better because everyone else is doing gold. So for no other reason, yours stands out because it's different. I like this one too because it's just a different color treatment to it. I love the shadows and highlights on this one as well. Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
Terry, do you know what that is?
What is it?
It's Lucario. You don't know Lucario? What? Unbelievable. Shout out my Pokemon fans out there.
I'm not a Pokemon person, so no, sorry, I didn't know. But shout out to the Pokemon fans that knew what that was. All right. Interesting. Nicely done. All right, let's look at this one. Just trying to look at what's going on with the jockey. So I don't know if these were what's happening right here, but these look like they were stripes, maybe. But now they look like they're cutouts. Stripes, yeah. So it's interesting. I might go back and just tweak this one little area a little bit.
Look, I might not actually do that thing.
Yeah. Cause I know, it's like it's cool, but it looks, I don't know what it is. So it looks like it's like he's cut out. All right, cool. I like the hand. Sterilized hand, sterilized hand awards. Nicely done. Relative, keeping up with the times. All right, it looks like we have some other challenges there. What's going on with this? Let me see what this is. Oh, mask. Okay. I'm assuming that's a mask. All right.
Some sort of strange stone.
Yeah. And it helps me, guys, especially when you show me the before and after. So I appreciate, kudos for showing me what it used to be and what you did to it. Kind of a nice step out effect, taking something, taking a photo and yep, and make it look 3D. I like that. Same thing going on here. Very cool. But which part of this was stock? Was the skateboarder stock or the background?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Terry, Jan said Terry and I are too old for Pokemon. We were old in the 90s. Okay. We are not here to drag.
Aundre may not be, but I am.
Terry White is great, and I will not have any Terry White slander. One of my friends just told me that you remind them of Perd Hapley, which is my favorite thing I've ever heard. Do you know who Perd Hapley is?
Oh, no, I don't. Now, this is by far, this is my favorite.
That's pretty
cool. This is my favorite. This is my favorite for a reason. Because not only did you take the hockey player and make the person 3D, which, again, that in and of itself looks cool, but you left the other player in the flat perspective. That's what makes this stand out for me. So if I have to pick a favorite of what I've seen so far, kudos to your creativity and your execution on this one. The other ones are great, don't get me wrong, but that one I love. So see, again, same thing here. This is nicely done. Don't get me wrong, it's a great shot. But having that 2D element still left in it, that's what made that one stand out for me. Again, this is nicely done. I even love the fact that you put the reflection in. And that's a nice thought, because if she were really skating on top of that phone, there would be a reflection there. So great job. But I love the fact that that one stood out with the 2D one there as well. So very cool. I love that one with the way that was done. All right, and I think that's it. Are there more? That was it. Okay, so we will look at tomorrow's challenges same way. So when we're up, we'll wait towards the end of the stream, just like we did now, and look at tomorrow's challenges as well. All right, are you ready to go back to what we were doing?
I am, and you need to look up Perd Hapley after this. I can't believe I've known you this long and never done that comparison.
Sorry, I have not. All right, we're back on your desktop.
He's Master from Parks and Recreation, and his show is called You Heard with Perd, and it's the best thing ever. But quick side note, Terry encouraged me to stream using this converter where I'm using my DSLR, and that's why the video looks cool. And we were unsure how long it could run, and it ran 2 hours on one battery. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So you didn't have to change it then? Or did you change it?
I just changed it, but remember we tested from 11:30.
Oh, so, true. It did run for 2 hours. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's awesome. So I just wanted to kind of drive home again the prefets profiles. We'll talk about this again tomorrow. Tell your friends, tell your kids and your wife, and come back. But here's an image I took with my friends in San Francisco. This is my friend Meredith. For the younger kids, she has what we like to call the drip. And she has this lovely jacket on, kind of cool colors. And I just want to get this photo out because I want everyone to know that I'm hanging out with a cool person. So I'm going to get back over to my presets and profiles. This is our normal color one, which it's on. This is modern. So you're seeing the difference. Modern is getting a little warmer, a little bit more contrast. Let's say I like it, but I think maybe the contrast is too much. So if you look at the difference between her shirt as I go over to Modern 7, we're seeing, you can see the warmth based on how her pants are changing. But if I go to her shirt, you'll see it's maybe almost too dark. I can't see the detail on her shirt anymore. It just looks like a completely black blob. So you would look at that and say that there was no detail there. And so let's just bring this down a little. So let's keep some of this warmth. but let's keep it closer to what we want to do, right? And that way you can get it done. And then when you're ready, you can hit share. I currently do not have the thing to show it with your phone, but I will happily show that another time if Terry will have me back. But you get everything ready to share. And the thing that's cool about Lightroom, especially on your phone, is after you take the photo, you can edit it and share it immediately. You can go to AirDrop for the iPhone people. You can text it. You can text a link. But it's like really good to share that way. And I can't show it here, but remember when you're using your, when you're using your Lightroom mobile or on the iPad, but anyone that takes photos on their iPad is a sociopath. I don't subscribe to that. If you are taking photos with your phone, you can use the Lightroom app to take raw photos with your phone. Most phones, I can't say every single phone, but all new phones and some older phones you can do it with. And if your phone has multiple cameras, you can also switch between them. I don't know. There's a bevy of phones. So I don't want to just say that, but
yeah, the raw capture support started with around the iPhone 7 time frame. So if you've got something newer than that, chances are your phone can shoot in raw.
You mean my iPhone 4S? Is it going to work, Terry? What's going on here?
Does it even still turn on?
Yeah, a year ago, I was on the train. I saw somebody, I'm not kidding, with the iPhone 3GS, and I was like, sir, where did this even come from?
You've gotten your money's worth. It might be time to upgrade.
So let's switch it up and talk about some food. This will be our last one. You guys are out with your homies. We're past that level of Instagram where we're all getting up and taking photos like on top of tables, and we want to take like nice detail of the food we're eating to flex on everybody to let them know they're better than they are. And so we want to get in, we want to go to our profiles. Remember, there are many ones and you can download more of them. But black and white, artistic, modern, vintage. So let's say vintage, because we're trying to look kind of cool. I really like this because what it's doing is it's actually giving you some nice brown in the shadows that kind of tapers off in a way. And so let's say I like it, I want to increase it some. You're seeing how it's like adding more, but it's to a degree I don't love. So now the highlights on her skin are a little green. And so I want to go ahead and bring it back down. And so you can go anywhere from 0 to 200% amount. And so let's look at our before and after. This is our kind of darker one. This is our slightly more vintage. And these are kind of a little bit emulating of film. So given that, Terry, someone earlier when you were showing those asked the difference between clarity and sharpening. And so I wanted to take a second and have us talk about that. And I would love if you would kind of guide us through that. For me, my understanding is that sharpening sharpens all the pixels. All of the edges of each pixel are sharpened. Versus clarity is adding punch or even a contrast to your midtones specifically. So it can give some of the illusion of sharpening, but doesn't do exactly the same thing.
All right, that's a good way to look at it. But actually, there's a third part of it in the mix as well. So let's switch over to mine for a second here. So I've got this flower here, and let's start with the detail area in Lightroom, and there is sharpening. Sharpening is actually a good thing. It's something that's even applied by default in a lot of cases when you import, especially raw images directly into Lightroom, you get sharpening by default. So it's great. You probably won't see a ton of difference. Like if I zoom in on this, and this is a fake flower, by the way, it's a soap flower, and I add a ton of sharpening, like I'm dragging the slider almost all the way over, and it's not, like I can see the detail here, but it's not over the top. You can really see it in the pores right in this area right here. So that's no sharpening. This is where it was, and this is cranking it all the way up. And typically we don't push sliders all the way up in Lightroom because you're usually going to introduce some artifacts or some ghosting or banding or halos or other weird things in the photo. But you can really see the difference on the pores of this particular silk flower right in that area, especially when there's no sharpening applied. So sharpening, I look at that as just like we looked at profiles, that's the beginning. That's where you do that to every photo. You want all photos to look a little sharper in the areas where they should be sharp. Okay, next, then under effects, you have two more things. You have clarity, which is what Aundre was referring to, but you have a new slider as well called texture. So
Yeah.
let me turn the
Talk about it, Terry.
clarity let me turn the clarity back down to 0. And let's go back out and look at it. So what does clarity do? And Aundre used the right term, punch. So it's adding more sharpness to the photo, but it's also changing the tonal values. So you can see the shadows getting darker. You can see the highlights getting brighter. You can see the shadows in those blue areas in the middle starting to fill in. That's what the blue means. I'm losing shadow detail in those areas. And if I turn the clarity all the way down, the image gets totally soft. So bigger difference than what sharpening did. Sharpening, I could take the slider all the way to the right and it didn't just damage the photo. This is starting to go too far. So I would back off the clarity. Now, clarity was my go-to as an effect to make a photo look sharper, but also just add more punch, add more contrast to the photo. But let's take the clarity back down and let's look at texture. Texture, on the other hand, is it's like clarity without the tonal changes. So if I bump up the texture, and here we'll zoom in so you can really see the difference. Let's go back down and let's zoom into that same area. If I bump up the texture, you really start to see it, but you're not seeing the tonal values change. You're just seeing the photo look super sharp, super texturized. Whereas if I do the same thing with clarity, you start to see other adverse effects happen, and the photo just starts getting darker in the dark areas and lighter in the light areas. So, are you saying, Terry, then I should only use texture? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a choice. If I don't want the tonal values to change, but I want my photo to look even more detailed and more sharp, then I'm going to use texture. If I do want to add a little punch, I do want to add a little contrast, then I'm going to use clarity. Is there ever a chance where I'm going to use both? Yeah, it depends. Because sometimes we just drag sliders and see what happens. So if I like the way it looks, when I drag both, I'll use both. But typically I'm using one or the other. I'm usually not using both. And I absolutely still use clarity because there are times where I want it to do what it does. All right, more on yours.
Jerry, where do you, the one thing that I do want to bring up, a lot of people love to use film grain. How does film grain play with the texture slider? Because I know sometimes when you, especially if you add grain and then someone is trying to maybe like make your photo a little less sharp or more sharp, it might.
Well, you got to remember, if you add any other kinds of artificial texture like film grain or like noise, noise will be the feature you do it in Photoshop. Then when you apply sharpening, texture, or clarity, you're sharpening that effect. So if you add noise, you're making the noise sharper when you move the texture slider. So that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It just depends on the photo.
I have never added noise in my life, but I have added grain quite a few times.
Yeah, well, they're technically around about the same things. The same look, in other words.
Oh, I agree. I'm doing the semantical thing. So really quickly, so I guess we're just going to leave color mix for tomorrow, which makes sense. We can tackle that.
Yeah, we got like 12 minutes or so left. And you have a question or you have a comment from Alice? Alice, Aundre, I've been a fan of your work. I'm wondering how you approach planning out your shoots. Do you go in with a list of shots that you want to get, or do you improvise and just go with the flow? That is from Alice.
I appreciate the positivity. Here, I will show you something. This is a mood board I made forever ago for this shoot I never did. A mood board I made like years and years ago about something called eating emotion. And I was wanting to do this shoot about like our relationship with food. But instead, I'm going to show you all something else. Let me find it. Now with shoots, what I like to do is I like to write out what I'm going to work on. And then usually if it's for a client, I have an example. So this is a job I didn't get. We're not going to talk about it. But basically for each thing that they talk about in the shot, I put together a shot list. It's kind of showing exactly what it is that I'm focusing on. If we're doing something on a rooftop, if we're like, so here I can write in. So I wanted to do rooftop sunset. So notice that since it was during quarantine, except for this photo, I tried to have a photo that only had 1 or 2 people in it, because I don't have access to more than that. And so on the inside, I'm just showing a mood board of what I have access to and, you know, what my shoot is. So usually, sometimes I'll do a mood board that has my photos. Sometimes I won't. Another thing that I like to do, wow, I actually have all my windows closed. That's really rare for me. I'll show you guys. Another thing that I like to do is I very habitually use the save feature on Instagram. Every time I see an image that I like, I'll save it. Like there's photos that Terry takes that I think are really cool because of how he chooses to light them. So let's go over to my page for a second. And then let's go to saved. And in here, you'll see different photos. I have like different folders, but I'm not sure it shows perfectly on the non-phone version. But here, like some of them are pretty normal. Like this is a photo of Andrea Hawk, who was a resident too, and I just actually think this is a really interesting way to take a selfie in an interesting pose. So sometimes I'll have photos that are just pose related. I'll have videos in here. But basically what I like to do, oh, I don't know if that sound played, but we should stop it. But I put things in folders and then I go back and refer to them when I'm getting ready for a shoot. But usually I like to plan through what I'm shooting. If it's like a client-based thing, I'll ask a ton of questions like, what are you looking for? Where's it going to go? Is it going to be big? Are you cropping? Is it a billboard? Like trying to understand, like if it was a billboard, this might not be the best photo of it, but I love this as a portrait of Ken Jones. So, and I said his name incorrectly, apologies. But also I love detail shots. Like this is from my friend Brooke Donato, who just does this really beautiful work that I don't do anything like, but I love this sense of balance and symmetry. So I might include that in a mood board just to remind myself how I want to shoot. But often the photos I'm saving are portraits that to me are interesting ways to shoot things. So like, let's say I have to shoot a celebrity. This is a nice little moment of detail that maybe I wouldn't necessarily work on. Or even here, like if I get through and they say we're going to style it this way, I can reference back to this shot and say, this would be a really cool photo. And this photo is a great example of what Terry and I were talking about earlier about the difference between whites and highlights. So that really explains it. I very habitually make, I save like probably 15 things a day, but just like different stuff. And I'm like really happy that I can refer back to it really simply. And I have all these folders that kind of explain stuff. So like for this might be an editing style I might want to chase, like how deep this blue is and how that looks in relation to this little bit of detail and how that comes out. And then another thing, oh, this is great. I didn't even think to show this. One of my absolute favorite things is this account Film Lights. It shows you how all of these scenes are lit. And not that your film and your photo lighting is the same, because sometimes it's a continuous versus strobe. But this is a really good way, and for me to like learn new ways to light things or how things are lit, like scenes that I really love. So like even this is showing like really kind of cool detail and its intimacy, and you're seeing that it's just using a single light that's cut in this part that just kind of rims on his face. So like something that I would like look through this, so I would write out like mood board that's light, mood board that's poses, and maybe that's color or editing style. And we're going to get away from my Instagram now. Let's close that. Does that answer your question? I hope so.
I think it did. All right. So a couple more things popped up.
Sorry, guys.
No, it was great. A couple more things popped up. So Alice, I know you're asking Aundre, but Aundre and I approach things slightly differently. I go in with a shot list simply because if I don't, I'll forget to take shots that I planned on. So I have to walk in with that physical checklist. Did you get this shot? Did you get that shot? Did you get the person looking this way? Did you get them, by the window, so forth and so on. So I have to go in with a shot list. Otherwise, I'll go home and I'll be like, oh, man, I forgot to shoot blank. All right, next, Jan's making a comment about the shutter on Lightroom camera in the Lightroom app on your phone. Wish there was a way to disable the sound. While there may not be a way to disable the sound directly, Flipping the little mute switch on your phone will disable the sound, so you won't hear it when you take pictures that way. Just as a workaround until they have a feature that lets you turn off the shutter sound.
Yes. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions? Or should we'll look at a couple other things.
Yeah, we got about 6 minutes or so left.
All right, things that I like, since it makes zero sense to go into color mix because it's not a 5-minute conversation. Here's a photo I took. Here's an outtake, but we're going to use this one for example. Another question I get a lot is, when do I use crop versus the geometry tool? Geometry tool is rad if you guys haven't checked it out. Down here it says upright, and you can go to guided or auto. Auto just uses the computer to figure out how it wants to take a photo, and like you see how it's this line. I think it just decides which lines are going to be straight, but I tried to shoot it right, and it basically was just slightly tilted. But you'll see if you go down here. I don't know. Here we go. You see if you go down here, if I go to off and I leave it where it was, that you can make different decisions. So you guys know, if you take, let's say you take your photo in your native camera app, there's that little like balance thing in the middle to let you know if it's balanced. Very rarely do we get it balanced, and that is because basically what happens is sometimes it's not like flattened. So let's say we want to take a picture of food. That's a good example of it. We want to take a top down of food. You can then move horizontally or vertically on this axis, which is really cool, and you'll see how something is presented looks a little different. So what auto did was it moved it horizontally, and then it just rotated it slightly to make these lines exactly where we wanted them. Sometimes you miss it. I would say that when you're taking a photo in your camera, you can actually use the grid and it'll help you, but sometimes you don't get it. And so it helps you to be able to use geometry. And so the main difference is, what I just did, I can do in geometry, but if I was going into crop, you can rotate in crop. But once I start to get, if I feel like it's not straight, and that's not because it's not because it's uneven, but because it's needs to be like warped slightly, then I will go into geometry. So I almost often just start in geometry because I can rotate as well as move vertically and horizontally. Terry, is there anything in geometry that you want to shout out? I don't really play with distortion, scale, or the XY offsets because I don't know what the XY offsets are.
No, I think you covered it. I'm just trying to think of, did you cover the, like you did it manually? Did you do the guided upright or the auto upright?
Oh, we can do guided. Guided is a great example.
Yeah, do guided.
So
yep.
Go back to where we were. So guided is rad also because, geez, it's funny because I swear I use this app, but it loves to act like I don't. So you draw a line. How many lines do you have to draw?
You have to have at least 2. Yeah.
Okay.
You can do more than 2, but it won't work until you have 2. It needs two angles to align on. So the way I use it is I draw guides on things that should be straight. So if a pole is leaning, a building's leaning, something's leaning that should be straight, that's a candidate for a guide.
So there we went from this to this, which is kind of what we ended up getting.
Yep.
We're off for a little bit, but the guided is good. And so, for example, ways that I would use it are, I shot something for a hotel, and I never got it right, and I have no problem being vulnerable with y'all, so I'll show you. I shot this thing for a hotel in Sarasota in my home state of Florida, and I had the hardest time with doing this eyeballing until oh my gosh, sorry. Until I used guided upright. And now I have to find the photo. But basically you'll see that there's just, at this hotel, there's just a lot of lines. So let's say I just shot it a little bit off, and there was this pool line, these lines, these lines, these lines. And so the upright really helped me get these kind of perfectly for where I needed to go, because it'll not only like rotate it, but it'll do like its appropriate little changes for stuff.
Very cool.
Okay, and then let's get back to that folder we were looking at. Let's get out of finals. And as a reminder for everybody, since we are like in the last couple minutes, some of these photos and edits that we talked about, you can once again find here on the Learn page. And if Terry or whoever else in the chat could drop that link in there, it'd be great. But basically, these guided edits, the ones that say edits, all come with a preset of basically what I edited, so you can try it out. And one thing that's nice about presets, which we'll talk about tomorrow, is you can get a preset where you want it, and then you can make your own changes and save it as a different preset. So we're going to come back tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be talking many more times during this quarantine and afterward. And instead of kind of running into more things, I just wanted to point this out again to you guys, and not just mine, also Terry's. And
all right, I'm going to have to cut you right there, because if not, they're going to cut us in a minute. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, for part 2 of Aundre working on his photos. So this has been fun. I always learn something here and there from Aundre, or a light comes on. So thanks, Aundre, for the inspiration. And up next is the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge, literally in just a couple minutes. So stay tuned.
Nice.
Aundre, thanks again. Dude, thanks, man. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I will get a Terry White shirt, and I will look awesome. And everyone will be jealous.
All right. Bye, everybody.